back to A Well-Designed Business. My name is Luann Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. It's Power Talk Friday. A couple of weeks ago, my friend Sandra Funk was here talking about the interior design standard and how to have a millionaire mindset and how to break out of fear mode. We know that Sandra gets it. We know that she understands that mindset is important, and so does today's guest, Janine Aurichio. Janine is a certified life coach, mental fitness coach, speaker, and founder of Yes to Yum Lifestyling. Now, I have been getting questions lately on what's up with the focus on wealth and health together. So you know that we're doing Luann Live November 2023, and it's called Health and Wealth, a well-designed business within a well-designed life. And some have been asking, what's the health part all of a sudden? Well, I would tell you that it has been part of this podcast and this platform from the beginning. Conversations like the one with Sandra and today with Janine, going all the way back to the beginning. Episodes with Jan Bowen on cultivating your intuition. Alex Gourlay, who discussed overcoming personal limiting belief systems and how it changed her business when she did that. Leah Maya Perez, who talked about her struggle with depression and having to get up and go to client consultations and dealing with it. And then, of course, there was Wendy Glaser, who discussed her triumph over domestic abuse and how when she turned the corner, every part of her life clicked, including her business. Many of these episodes have been on the show from the very beginning because I know being healthy in body and mind are undeniably entwined. And they are undeniably entwined with creating and managing a successful business. Taking care of the mind and not the body, or taking care of the business and not the mind or the body, well, it just will not work. You will not be in your best position to be successful. Now, on Instagram over the last month, I've been sharing my health journey leading up to Luann Live. I have drawn the line in the sand to take care of my physical body and mind before I work each day. I had, over the last 7 years of doing this podcast, developed a habit of basically waking up and going right to work, literally turning my computer on and beginning work. And what happened was my daily routine of exercising in the morning for almost 30 years went right by the wayside, okay? And what I've learned is when my physical body is firing on all cylinders, then my mind follows. And then there comes all the things in business that I want to do as well, because I have the energy, the creativity, and the headspace to get it all done. And so I have made a commitment that I am turning a corner. And for 1 month, sometimes it's only 8 minutes and sometimes it's an hour and a half. But I am not working before I nourish myself and I move my body. And so this is a shift for me. It's a shift to who I used to be, but I'm telling you, it's not easy making this transition back because, of course, my head is racing with all the things to do every single day of the week. And guess what? I love doing them. That's the thing. So conversations on mindset, on self-development, on overcoming personal challenges have been a part of the podcast from the very beginning. And all the differences is now we're going to talk about it together in person. So I encourage you to go to luannlive.com to learn more and join me. I think the timing is perfect. November, so that when you leave in November, you have the last 6 weeks of the year to make your plan, to dream about the strategy for 2024 so that you can make the next year the best year for both your mind and body. Okay, go to luannlive.com to learn more. Now, Janine gets into this too, okay? Janine coaches design professionals like you on what she calls the inside job, which creates the mindset and mental fitness needed to run your business with clarity, purpose, and ease. She uses her signature lifestyling approach, and she helps her clients go from stress and overwhelm to calm, clear, and creative. Sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? Right. And I am, as I mentioned, bonus point, she is a former interior designer herself. Janine is here to teach us that until we do the inner work of managing our mind, we will not reach our highest levels of performance with lasting peace of mind. And the best part, she actually has tools to help us do this work. I love that part. So I'm very excited to share Janine with you. Hey, Janine, thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Hi, Luann. It is a thrill to be here.
So I'm loving this whole little, dynamic that's happening. Here you are, currently a life and business coach, but come from being an interior designer and working in the industry for years. And so I love this intersection. It reminds me of Desi Creswell. She was also an interior designer and became a life and a business coach because it gives you do have, just a little different perspective and insight as to really the chaos that happens in a designer's day, week, month, year, right?
Yep.
And the thing about it is what you said in your intake form to me, I love the way you coined it, that we are all walking around with the inner sage and the inner saboteur in our mind. And I thought, isn't that just a great way to say the stories in our head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so talk to me a little bit about that, Janine, the inner sage and the inner saboteur, and what have you learned and what do you go through with your coaching with interior designers?
Absolutely. So being human is hard, right? The human condition can be challenging. Part of that is because our brains are wired for negativity 3-to-1. It's called the negativity bias. And that was for survival reasons. When our species was developing, it was way more important for us to remember the color of the poisonous frog or the poisonous mushroom versus the color of the pretty butterfly. So we are always scanning the environment for what's potentially a threat, harmful, dangerous, etc. And so that's the saboteurs. That's one side of our brain going on, the survival brain you've probably heard about. We've also got this wonderful, calm, creative, loving part of our brain that we'll call the sage, that that is the complete opposite of the saboteurs. It is motivated by love. The voice is very quiet, so we have to quiet down those saboteurs. And it's got much more of a pull energy, or like an attraction, versus these saboteurs, which are pushing. And so pretty much everyone in, I think, our society, I can't speak for the entire world, but we've been groomed to listen to those fear-based voices and push. And we all have that negativity bias. And so yes, those are the voices inside that talk to us. They have negative thoughts like, oh, this is bad, or oh, you can't do that, or oh, I shouldn't do that, or oh, this person is dangerous. And then they also have emotions that go with it, and it's usually things like stress and anxiety and disappointment and regret and blame and shame and what we'll call negative emotions. That's all coming from that survival brain. And so what I try to do for people, and I do this work myself because I'm human and I'm also struggle with this stuff, is to teach them a process for catching those voices, quieting them down, and accessing that sage more, so that on balance, we can be more in a positive space and respond to things rather than reacting.
I'm racking my brain. Uh, in the last 4 days, I have heard that same sentence recently. I don't know which podcast I was listening to. I don't know what it was, but it was some out of industry podcast. And it literally was that same negative bias, that we are wired from negative bias. And the thing about it is, Janine, you know how you always have to hear things multiple times, multiple ways for it to make an impact on you? I don't know that I would have consciously recalled that I just heard that, but I did just hear it. And when you said it, I was like, oh, that's crazy. And I went, wait a minute, I just learned that. So that is nutso to me, but I get the logic of it, right? Like if you're, I guess what it is so nutso to me is that how many, I don't know, is it hundreds of thousands? You have no idea. And I'm not an anthropologist, right? But how that, I get it served us at caveman level, how it's still in us. It's like so nuts, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we no longer need to, be afraid of the tiger jumping out of the bushes. But and I can't speak to this either because I'm not a biologist or a neuroscientist, but our brains have kept that wiring. And, we need to be discerning, and it's good to be aware of your surroundings and recognize true threats. But
Right.
what the saboteurs do is take it to an extreme. It's like putting kerosene on, what may be a little threat or a little danger or a little like, uh-oh. The fear brain puts the kerosene on it, and woof, then you've got a full-blown forest fire. And
Yeah. And let me ask you a question.
sure.
And you might say, you know what? Like I just told you, Lou, I'm not a biologist or a scientist here, but are you aware of like, is there percentages of like, is it also like environmental? So it's absolutely in our brain to have negative bias, but then like I just know that I'm distinctly, typically a more positive person. And so is that come from your environment where the saboteur within you has less of a, like the voice is lower? I'm not going to, I am a human. I have them too. I'm not going to say it's not there, but is the volume of it come from your experience and your upbringing? Or is that just random? Like, hey, you got brown hair and you got less negativity bias. Like, do you know anything about that?
To the extent of my understanding, we are born with this in us. And yes, can circumstances, environment, add to it or detract from it? Yes. And that's kind of the extent of my knowledge. But really,
Yeah.
we all kind of
Yes.
suffer with it.
Right. It's in there. It's in there. It's part of all of us. Interesting. And so, it's funny because I've designers that have coached with me and window treatment professionals that have coached with me, they know that we often have this conversation of, you have a story in your head about this. Right. And here's the story. The story is that, blah, blah, blah. Like if I do this, this is going to happen. I'm like, but here's the thing. How about this story? Like, if you do this, then this will happen. And I said, and what makes one story more valid, more believable? This is literally your thought process. You're the one with the story. This is not a fact. Right. And so that is the thing that I find that, to me, it's just, it's kind of like my feeling on aliens. This is like going off on a deep tangent.
Okay,
Okay.
let's do it.
But like, I don't study anything having to do with space. I don't know a darn thing about it, okay? But it is just illogical to me to think that the Earth is the only planet in the multiple solar systems, in the multiple galaxies that has life on it. It's just so egocentric of a thought that my brain, I can't even have a debate about it because I'm just like, it's, I can't even imagine it not being possible. It's almost like when you are on trial, you have to be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. You'll never be able to prove to me beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's possible that there's life. Okay. Now, do they have, heads that are 20 feet long and bodies that are a foot long? I don't know. I don't care. But so to me, it's the same thing with this story in your head. It's, the story is made up. So why do we sometimes put too much emphasis on it? And what you're saying is one part of it is this wiring of negative bias. What else happens, Janine, that we do, that we will indulge in this story that's not the good story but the bad story?
Well, it's it's kind of it like feeds on itself, right? It's sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy. So the first saboteur that usually pops up is the judge, and the judge sets off the alarms of saying, "Ooh, this is bad, bad, bad," and causes most of our stress. And either I'm bad, you're bad, or the circumstance is bad. The judge is like responsible for imposter syndrome. It's that inner critic, right? And you better believe that as I was sitting here waiting for you, my little judge was popping up. I call her Cruella, saying, "Oh, well, why are you on this podcast? You're not, blah, 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 blah." So that, unconsciously, and we're not responsible for that first thought, but this whole idea is of this practice is to try to catch that first thought so that we can do something about the next one. Because otherwise it's like off to the races. And, I'm not sure why it is. You can liken it to like putting your hand on a hot stove. Like, you want to feel that pain because you're going to pull your hand away. But with these negative emotions, we tend to like just put our hand on there and stay there, right? We kind of
Oh,
grind
right.
on it. The mind gets going and the stinking thinking. It's it's almost like confirmation bias. It's confirming the fear-based thought and running with it. So we actually have to um, be able to build up it's like mental muscle strength. Like I talk
Mm,
about mental fitness as part of this framework called positive intelligence. And this mental muscle strength is what allows us to catch ourselves when, like, oh, there's that judge telling me I'm not good enough again, or oop, there's my controller trying to control things again, so that we can
okay.
shift to um, a different perspective. And with
Right.
this framework, and the sage knows that any situation or circumstance can be turned into a gift or an opportunity. So that's sort of the crux of the whole thing, is like, oh, okay, this might seem bad. I just lost a client. Oops, this is bad. But oh, I can turn this in somehow. This can be turned into a gift or opportunity. And that's where the agency comes in with us. That's where we take our power back to shift to more positivity.
I love this whole description and discussion on this because um, I've said it 1,000 times on the podcast. I love that when I learn when I do something and there's a thing about doing it, like it has like it's called something or whatever. Because I would tell you, my Aunt Honey and my mother, I talk about them all the time.
Hmm.
They taught me from a young age, all of us kids, is this seems hard right now. This is difficult. You don't like what's happening, blah, blah, blah. But what's the lesson in it?
Hmm.
And the thing about what I just heard, what you said is that negative bias emotion or thought is going to show up. But the idea and the practice is to quickly grab it and turn the perspective on it rather than keep leaning your hand on the hot stove and dwelling in it.
Yes.
And that is the exact mechanism that they have taught us kids. Okay, that happened. Okay, let's keep going now. Keep
Hmm.
it moving. And of course, I've always likened it to tough talk and big girl panties and all of the things. But I think at its core, it's sort of what you're talking about with this. So go through this. So this is this positive intelligence framework
Yes.
that you talk about. I love this. So it's going to give us strategies to, because we're all, what you're saying is, and I don't think anybody listening is saying, not me, I never have sabotaging thoughts.
Right. I'm not lying
Like,
awake at 3 a.m. with worrying.
yes, that's right. Like we've all done it. We've all been there. And I think what I'm hearing is it's to the extent that it cripples us, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean, like, does it's the extent of, does it take over an hour and we lose an hour? Does it take over a day? Does it take over a week? Any one of those could be unacceptable at any moment to any of us.
Hmm.
But that's the thing. It's going to happen. It's how do we handle it when it happens is your whole point, right?
Yes. Yes. And I should say, or want to
Okay.
say that the impact of these characters, it affects everything. So I'll take a little
Mm,
tiny step back for a second. So yes, positive intelligence is this framework created by a gentleman named Shirzad Shamin. And I've studied it, I practice it, and I teach it now. And they took the latest findings from neuroscience, positive psychology, cognitive behavioral psychology, and performance science with over 500,000 subjects and boiled things down to their very root essence, um, which makes it very simple and gets to the core instead of like treating the symptoms. We're dealing with the core, and this is why it applies kind of to everyone. um, they've studied people all over the world, so it's not just a cultural thing. When you boil these things down, the impact of these saboteurs, it impacts our performance, it impacts our relationships, and it impacts our overall happiness or satisfaction, our overall well-being. And I think why that's important with my clients, I talk a lot about prosperity. And to me, that is both the physical results we want plus the lasting peace of mind or peace of heart or
mm,
happiness or ease. I hear ease a lot from my clients.
mm,
And um, I wanted to share that with especially designers who are bringing all this beauty into the world, because I know what a chaotic, complex business it can be. And so, yes, we want you to have the successful business. And as we talked about, you need those processes and all the amazing things that your guests share with your listeners. And if you want to reach your highest levels of performance with that lasting peace of mind, you've got to deal with this inside stuff.
mm, mhm. Okay. So what you're basically saying is we want to deal with it because we want a positive outcome in our everyday life. We want the voices in our head to be pleasant as opposed to unpleasant, but it also impacts us in other ways, physiologically, stress, all the things. I'm sure it raises our cortisol, all the crappy stuff, right?
Absolutely. It keeps us up at night, and then it's no good when you can't sleep. And then we make poor choices about diet and on and on.
Right?
Or I
Okay.
do anyway.
So well, yeah, no, right? That's the thing. That's why it's called comfort food.
Right.
Like, let's be serious. It's not called you feel strong and ready to
Right.
hit the world food. It's called give me those fries and make them Jersey style with gravy and cheese.
I miss that.
I know, right? Okay, so you work with this framework called positive intelligence, and this is like the steps that we can engage and we can activate in our brain, and when we first have those saboteur thoughts coming through, Janine.
Correct. Yes. Intercepting the saboteurs is kind of the first muscle, if you will. The second muscle is that sage perspective I talked about of um, accessing and believing that, oh, there is a opportunity or a gift here. And I do want to say it also depends on the severity of what's coming at us. Like if life's just throwing at us
Mm,
some little annoyance, like, oh, my Wi-Fi is out, we can quickly think about like, oh, this gives me time to do some writing I wanted to do, or, I don't know, clean the kitchen, something. If
right,
when it's
right. Get the laundry done.
they'll get the laundry done. But the bigger the challenge coming at us, we might need some time and space to get that perspective of, oh, there's a gift here, right? So that I
Right,
just do
right.
want to say that it's not like this Pollyanna, like, oh, my house just burnt down and oh, where's the gift? Like, No.
Right.
Right.
I'll get new furniture.
Okay, right. So there's intercepting those
Not
saboteurs.
really caring at that moment.
Assuming that, getting in that mindset, at least knowing like, oh, I don't see the gift now, but I know that there will be eventually.
Right.
And then the last thing is actually it's a practice of doing very simple exercises where you just focus really intensely on a single physical sensation. And that is what actually has proven to shift the neural pathways to allow you to take um, the more positive stance and to get you into
Mm.
that sage part of your brain. And they showed this on functional MRI machines, actually, that different parts of your brain lit up when you were in saboteur mode and then when you did these simple exercises. And this is how we quiet that survival brain. And it is a practice. Like, I don't know, if you've ever been to a workshop or read a self-help book where you're like, wow, this is like the best idea ever. This is going to change my life. And a week later or a month later or 6 months later, it's like, what was that?
Right. Right.
That's the insight. The insight is important to learn this stuff and like what you and I are talking about. And then really where the rubber meets the road is that this is a daily practice, almost like going to the gym or brushing your teeth, that you need to do these simple exercises every day throughout your day to build up that muscle so that you can more quickly shift to the sage perspective. And
Okay.
it probably wouldn't be very interesting on audio to walk your audience through what these exercises are, but just to give you an idea, it might be, getting quiet and just focusing in on your sense of hearing and listening for the farthest away sound you can hear, or
Mm.
listening to the closest sound you can hear, just really keying in on your hearing, or really just listening to your breathing, or watching, witnessing your chest or stomach rise as you're breathing. Noticing the temperature of air, the difference when you inhale versus when you exhale. Or even there's one of just rubbing two fingers together with so much focus that you can feel the ridges, like your fingerprint on both fingers.
Mm.
And that simple, right? All of this is very simple and profound, but not always easy, especially when we're in
Mm.
the middle of our crazy day and, you find out your shipment is late and they're calling from the job site and, this is going wrong and you've got to, you're already 10 minutes late for your next meeting. And that's when the saboteurs are whipped up. And that,
Mm.
ironically, or maybe not coincidentally, is when the most important time of when we need to be like getting quiet and going into these physical sensations so we can shut off the chatter.
So those are the 3 steps? Is there another step before I start asking you
There,
about these
the,
steps?
there is the last step is actually once you've assumed the sage perspective and activated your sage brain a little bit, is to then generate the gift. That's when you can
Okay.
have a clear head to be like, okay, where might there be a gift of knowledge here that there's something I can learn or a knowledge I can apply to this problem that will help me in the future? Is there are 5 sage powers that we can talk about if we have time, but can I apply one of the sage powers to this and grow that power in me so that I will be even stronger next time this sort of thing comes up? So the last step is creating the gift.
Okay. So if we go back to the first step is intercepting the saboteur thought,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, to your point, there are all different levels that this can be engaged, like all different problems, all different levels of problems that this can be engaged in the use of. So one is I just got the phone call, I'm on site, and the delivery truck broke down 15 miles out, and we're not getting the entire house full of furniture on time.
Right.
So that's one. And then another is, maybe something way, way more serious having to do with your personal, the personal health or safety or health of your friends or family or children or whatever.
Right.
So there's different levels here, right? But the idea is that no matter what the level, it's what you're saying is grab that thought.
Mm-hmm.
Just and so are we grabbing the thought of that happened? So, like, the truck is broken down 15 miles out. Are we just grabbing the thought of this is upsetting and this is going, my client is going to be pissed? Or are
Mm-hmm.
we grabbing the thought of, and then the entire project is going to go off the
Right.
rails? Like, it doesn't matter. Just grab the first negative
We
thing that we hear and feel
we may not
in
catch
our
we
head.
may not catch that first one, right? Like the alarms go off, like this is bad. And depending on what other accomplice saboteurs you have, your controller might jump in, or your victim might jump in, or the avoider might jump in. But
Oh,
yes, it will. If
ah,
not intercepted, it will definitely go down that. Oh, the truck is stuck. This is bad. My client's going to hate me. I'm going to get fired. I'm never going to get a project again. I'm going to go out of business. I'm going to be homeless. Blah, blah, blah.
yeah, that's a pretty
So
crazy hairy path right
yes,
there from the truck breaking down, I was gonna say.
exactly. And so those exercises I talked about are what we can do to build up the strength to catch ourselves quicker. So wherever, yes, you want to catch that negative thought or feeling too. There's often feelings that go along with each saboteur. Like with the judge, it's stress.
Hmm,
With the stickler, which I have high stickler, it's anxiety. Same with the controller, or the controller is a lot of times is also like disappointed and grumpy. The hypervigilant person is kind of nervous. So each of the accomplice saboteurs come with a feeling. So whether you catch yourself like, oh, I've got that icky anxiety feeling again, or oh, I'm thinking this is bad and I've got this fear-based thought that my life is going to end. um,
right.
and there
Okay.
is, like, I put my clients go through a training program. So this isn't just me talking about it. There's actually a program that you go through that can train you in all these things that we're talking about: intercepting the saboteurs, accepting that sage perspective, and then creating the gift. It's
So I think that makes more sense. So, like, if we it's what's funny is I often talk about, like, when I'm teaching a workshop or having a conversation about sales and about negotiation, with exciting windows every fourth Thursday, I'm teaching some workshop on sales or negotiation. And I'm constantly using the phrase, just observe the
mm,
situation. Like, you don't, like, if you give your client a proposal, you tell them this is how much it costs, and they're like, that's ridiculous. This is way too much money. It's not worth it. Like, none of that has to do with you. That's like just words. It's just like sit there and watch it like it's a movie.
mhm.
And so it sounds like kind of like there's mechanisms of, like you mentioned, judgment and stickler as accomplice saboteur. So it's like, you're just piecing it out and saying, oh, this isn't really my real thought. This is the judgment saboteur coming in, or this is the stickler saboteur coming in. It almost seems like that same kind of mechanism for depersonalizing it is kind of what
Yes.
I'm getting at.
Yeah, it's
That
a
makes
little bit of
sense.
detached. Like your sage is probably a little more detached from
Mm-hmm.
the fracas of whatever's going on, and I would call it sage discernment. And
Mm,
actually, I mean, you sound like you have quite a high sage, because that explore idea is one of the sage powers about being really curious. Like, oh, what is
mm,
going on, without non-judgmental curiosity. Like, oh, what are all the facts? What did they just say? Oh, what could that mean? Or where are they maybe right? Where are they not?
right,
Um,
right.
so it's that getting that
Yeah,
little bit of distance so that we're not in the fray
right,
of all the negativity, and can
right.
get that little bit of separation to think more clearly, that like clear-headed focus, so that we can take informed action. right?
Mm.
And not just
Yes.
react and
Yeah.
be, ah.
Right, right, right. Well, and so when you're saying is like first identifying the thought, right, and grabbing it and
Mhm.
stopping it, pulling your hand off the stove. Obviously, is
Yep.
a great analogy for that. And then you're talking about accessing your sage. So this is where you are picking it apart and just saying, are there other reasons for this? Why am I thinking this? Is this a truth? Is this a sage truth, or is this a saboteur truth? Like,
Mhm.
what am I happening here? And then what this practice of simple exercises focusing on a single sensation, that is literally that's like a physical mechanism to just grab your mind away from this
Yes.
circus, it sounds like,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And you can
I
do
like
it
it.
in the moment if you can. Um, it's also like we go to the gym or exercise regularly so that we're fit when the moment comes up. So you can also, have a regular practice of these exercises so that you're building that mental muscle so that you can respond more healthfully. And then you can also preempt. Like now, if like before, I got on this podcast with you, I knew, oh, maybe I'll be a little nervous. That judge is going to come up. Like I'm going to sit here and do a few minutes of these PQ reps and fire up my sage. Or if you know you have a tough phone call you have to make and deliver some bad news, or it's a difficult person, you can sort of preempt it. Um, and do these exercises, or even if you're in a meeting, some of them are like nobody's going to know if you're just focusing on sounds, right? You can be sitting
Mhm.
there and just doing them while
Right.
no one knows. And so that's why it's really cool. And that's really the meat and potatoes of the practice, is getting used to interrupting our busy day, because we are out of the gate, right? We are up and
Right.
out of the gate, especially in this
Yep.
business. And yeah, if we can just you can turn every day, things you do every day, washing your hands. If you just focus on the sound of the water, or, the feeling of your hands rubbing together, or the smell of the soap, brushing your teeth, walking the dog. Like, how are my feet just feeling right now? Where are they contacting the ground? What muscles are involved? So it's really, you can just put that singular focus on kind of anything.
Mm. And the idea of it, and I love it, and I believe in it, because the idea of it is if you are actually single mindedly focused on that, you absolutely have to disengage
Hmm.
from the negative thoughts that were happening from the initial saboteur. I do this with my
Huh?
grandchildren on the regular.
I love it.
Every single time one of them falls down, cracks their whatever part of their body on something. I mean, and I'm talking about when they're really crying and it really hurts. And it's like, I just scoop them up and I'm just like, okay, we're going to do deep yoga breaths.
Hmm.
Like I mean, my grandson 2 weeks ago, I'm going to tell you what, Janine, he went head first, full steam into one of the um, apparatuses at the playground,
Oh.
and I was across the playground. I was 100% sure we were going to the emergency room.
Hmm.
100. I was terrified. And I go darting across and I scoop him up and I'm just going to get an assessment. Is his nose broken?
Right.
Is his teeth knocked out? I mean, it was that
Oh,
level stuff.
poor guy.
And I'm looking at him. He's got no blood. Nothing looks smashed. Nothing. And I just sitting there like, okay, Wonka, deep yoga breaths with my mom. And you can't cry and be carrying on if you're trying to breathe.
Right.
Like you just can't.
Right.
And depending on their level of fear, anxiety, or pain, I can say it 2 or 3 times and they can take 2 or 3 breaths and it's done. But
Mhm.
in that case, it was like he stopped breathing and then he was like terrified and scared
Yes.
and screaming again. And then you just keep doing it. And that makes sense to me. Like if I'm just sitting in a meeting and I'm going to sit there and feel the ridges on my fingers, like that takes an incredible amount of focus to
Hmm.
do that. So
Hmm.
therefore, I can't feel this anxiety of this judgment voice or this other saboteur in my head. It literally just disengages the brain from that negative path, right?
Absolutely. It gets you in
I
your
love
in
it.
your body, which has so much wisdom, and gets us out of that one little part of the brain. We can use the rest of our
Right.
brain. And I love, Luann, that you brought up, comforting your grandson, because there's a contagion effect to the saboteurs, and there's a contagion effect with the sage too. And part of that is neurological. The other, neurological thing I know is we have things called mirror neurons that you start to mirror the neurological state of people around you. So if you're calm and soothing and, just grounded and comforting, that's going to start to spread. And I'm sure we've all also been with people or in situations where someone is wound up, stressed out, like, their energy is,
Yeah.
and you start feeling that too. And you start feeling kind of icky. So there's definitely, like, what do you want to be spreading? Even if you don't believe anything I'm saying, right? Whoever's listening, just try and experiment. Like, what would you rather be spreading, even for yourself? Like, say, oh, well, next time this happens, I'm just going to try this and see how it feels to, say to myself, there's a gift and opportunity here. Pay a little bit of attention to my senses and just see how I feel, even after 3 minutes. When I give
Right.
talks on this, I love it because, it's usually like a luncheon or an after work, event with a professional association, and people are chatting and keyed up from their day, or they're really tired. And in live scenarios, I will walk them through about 3 minutes of doing these exercises. And it's like the whole energy of the room just shifts. Their faces relax. I love it. It's this cool moment
Wow.
where, yeah, it's really powerful stuff.
Yes, yes. No, it's true. I mean, I think we all know at some level that our emotions are contagious, whether they're positive or negative. I mean, we've all been in the situation where something went haywire, and then who's the person in the room that's off the
Right.
rails immediately?
Yep.
And I'm just like, can we just like get a hook for that person and get that person out? Because that is not helpful right now. Like, remove that whole energy ball
Uh-huh.
out of here.
Out. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's the truth. And the kids do, to your point, the kids do, like, I cannot stress how 100%, but I'm just like, hey, I got you, buddy. We're good. Deep yoga breath with my mom. Let's do this. Come on. And you're
Yeah.
breathing, and he's just like looking at you like, oh, okay,
Mm.
I guess I'm not as hurt as bad as I thought I was. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
well, you probably are, but we're going to take a minute. Don't actually ask me that
Right,
question
right.
because I'm not sure of the answer yet. Right.
It's
So, is it helpful for us to have some of these names of these saboteurs and these sage, personalities or whatever you call them? Or is that just too much information? You're like, Luann, you needed a whole,
No,
program on
I
it.
think it's fascinating. I mean, we certainly could do a whole program, but I think it's fascinating, and I'm certain that the listeners will hear some of themselves in these and recognize it, because awareness is the first step to making any
Yeah.
change. If we're not
Right.
aware, well, then we're just going to keep bouncing around through life like we always have been.
Right.
um, and there's also a saboteur assessment people can take that
Oh,
we could maybe include a link to that in show notes. It's never a
yeah.
surprise, but it's fun to take. So
And so what does this do, Janine? Does this reveal what our tendencies
yes,
are in the saboteur brain that we each have that part of? So, like, what we're more likely to go towards.
yes, exactly.
Interesting.
And
I'm gonna take that.
I'll say a few things about the saboteurs before I name all the accomplices. They are, most of us all have some of all of them. It can depend on the time in your life. Like, I used to have a very
Mm,
strong pleaser. The pleaser is now quieter, and stickler and controller are a lot more active. It could depend on the day and just what sort of mindset you're in, or what you've just dealt with. Um,
mm.
the happy news about the saboteurs is that they're rooted in our greatest strengths. So
Yeah, that's always the case, right?
right? It's
It's
just
always
it's just
it's
blown out of
always
proportion. So stickler, I'm organized, I have good attention to detail, a high I want excellence, I have a high standard of quality. We don't want to get rid of that. That's all good. It's when it gets that kerosene or the hot stove of like, whoa, this is, the end of the world. Or I also have a high controller. Controllers tend to be like confident and take initiative. But again, blown out of proportion, it can cause some trouble.
Mm,
um,
right.
I think those are the main things. So, and none of this is meant to make anybody feel bad by any means. It's just kind
No.
of it is what it
Right.
is. Well, the judge might pick it up and be like, "Oh, well, you're such a stickler. Like you're even worse than I thought you were." So the judge will pick stuff up and run with
Okay.
it. So, um, no, this is
So
not fodder for beating yourself up more. Is all.
no, 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 no.
Yeah.
So I think you nailed it on the head. It's for awareness
Hmm.
because if you can't identify it, if you're not even aware enough to identify it, how can you start to separate from it
Right.
and acknowledge it and move through it?
Exactly.
That's the thing, right? So you have pleaser, stickler, controller,
Avoider.
judge,
Yeah. Avoider.
avoider.
The hyperachiever. Hyper rational. Hyper vigilant. Restless, and victim. I think we got all of them there.
Okay, restless and victim. So they don't when we take this test, this little assessment, we're going to find that we gravitate toward a couple, one or
Yes.
whatever of these, and I like this because now as soon as we find ourselves in a situation and the negative thoughts start to come in, we can go, "Ooh, is that thing?" Right?
Hmm.
And that even that starts to separate you from
Yes.
keeping your hand on the stove because you can't keep thinking about this negative thought if you're starting to figure out how to identify
Yes.
who's in your head.
Exactly. Which
I
voice is
love
this coming up? Who's the
I
committee?
love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So for example, like so that the truck doesn't show up. It's not going to show up. So the victim is automatically going to go, and that's why every one of my projects
Right.
goes to pot.
This always
Right? Like
happens to
right?
me, of course. Yes. This.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yes.
yes. Okay, we all know those types of people. And what like so some of like hyperachiever, hyper rational, hyper vigilant.
Hmm.
What is some of the processes? I'm not having trouble figuring out what those sentences sound like to
Sure.
in their head.
In that scenario, the hyperachiever would just be crushed because their your
Ah,
value and your like enoughness is tied to achievements. So, oh, if I can't do the install today, that means, I'm bad.
oh, I mean,
So,
I may as well just close my design firm.
yeah, yeah.
You
Um,
know.
Hyper
Okay.
rational in that situation, the hyper rational is like over applies rationality in dealing with people and emotions. So that, in that instance, the hyper rational may actually come in handy because they're just going to try to like figure it out and what are the facts.
Mm,
But
okay.
often, and in a design business and just in life, there's a lot of different people involved. Um, Projects
And it could be
are complex.
pursuing it negatively, right? It could be
Right.
like, "Get out of my way, this is" like, "Well, there's 15 other people that have to, like, there's actually an accident there in a 15-car pileup, cancel, cancel,
Right.
so we can't just get the people to do the things,"
Right.
right?
Right.
Like yeah, like, we're not sending a helicopter to pick up the
Right.
furniture, right? So it's
Yeah.
like they're hyper trying to figure out the solution irregardless, that's not a word,
Regard.
regardless
Hmm.
of Okay,
Yeah, and it's
okay,
to the
I get that.
detriment of, especially in design, so many of the things we need to figure out are very complex and need intuition and involve emotion. And so when you're only trying to apply A plus B equals C to a problem, that's very limited. And that's the hyper rational is all about, very linear thinking and like this equals that, without understanding,
Okay,
yes, but no, you're also dealing with people who, you know,
right.
have feelings and have their wishes and dreams and whatever. And so they can be sometimes observed as being almost kind of cold, like just so
Mm,
rational. And the hypervigilant is the chicken little, the sky is falling. Like
oh,
constantly, it's that scanning of the atmosphere, the surroundings of what might be going wrong, but the hypervigilant just takes it to an extreme. Continuous
okay.
anxiety about the dangers and what could go wrong and going down that that drain.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know people
So the
that that's their,
hypervigilant,
well, what if this happens?
right.
Well, what if it doesn't? Like, let's go.
Yeah. Exactly. And the
Right.
hypervigilant,
Yeah.
before even getting to that scenario, might have, they're the one who's making, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And sometimes that's good because you might have contingency plans to come up with, but usually you're just so exhausted and anxious from thinking about everything that could go wrong that you're not very useful in the moment.
Mm. I think that's really the crux of it, right? Like there's, it's a matter of the degree that this saboteur takes over your ability to process what you're experiencing.
Absolutely.
It's, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you said, a hyper vigilant person, that's an awesome project manager. They have plan B, C, and D ready. Great. But they're, oh, this didn't happen. That, I wanted my plan A to happen on every one of these.
Hmm.
Well, sweetie, it didn't.
Yep.
Glad that you had a B here, right?
Right.
So, okay, I get that. And then, you know, judge in that situation is judge where you now go to the delivery company is bad, who picked that company, like is that judge, like that's also like what's the point? That's the company you hired, that's the company that's stuck in the pilot, right?
Yes.
It's is that what judge
The
is?
judge has 3 modes, and they could all be firing at once. You judging yourself, like, oh, the voice, that inner critic comes up of, oh, Janine, you could have planned better. Like, of course this happened because you're so inept at your job. Yes,
Uh,
the trucking company, judge of others. Oh, that trucking company is terrible. I'm never going to use them again. Don't ever use them again. They're bad. Judge is all about bad,
right.
bad, bad. And the third one is that, oh, this whole circumstance is bad. So yeah, the
Okay.
judge kicks off the party and is usually responsible for most of the stress. And then add on an accomplice or two and you're off
To
and
the
running.
races.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Now, so we have the other side though. We have our sage accomplices. What are some of our sage accomplices that we can recognize? Because
Yes.
sometimes we have a negative thought and our sage comes right in. So we should say high five to ourselves, right?
Yeah, totally. And we'll call them sage powers in this instance. And there's
Okay.
only 5 of them that you need in order to quiet down these saboteurs. And they are empathize, explore, innovate, navigate, and activate. And empathize is always a really good place to start because it's kind of where the biggest shortage is in in society today, and maybe in business too. It's like, oh, empathy, that's, I
Mm,
can't go there. So empathy for ourselves, like in that truck is broken down, like, oh my gosh, Janine, yeah, of course, like you're having a moment because this is
it's
this
important.
is important. You've worked so hard and you were excited, and the other people are counting on you. So, and
And God
empathy
forbid what's
for the
happening to
truck
that trucking
driver,
guy.
exactly,
Yes.
and how freaked
How
out
about
they
him,
are.
right?
Yeah. Um, so that's, empathy's always a good place to start. And even if you just start and stop there, usually in a better place.
Mm,
Explore is what you were saying earlier about being curious. It's that curiosity, like, yes, what non-judgmental curiosity, what are all the facts? What do I need to know? What's really happening? Just like we call it, being like a fascinated anthropologist, just like what's
mm,
going on here, with that certain amount of detachment.
mm-hmm.
And not all of these powers, you don't need to use all 5 all the time.
Right.
Sometimes it just takes one. So that's explore. And innovate obviously is, just pure idea generation. This is the innovation cycle when it's just generating ideas without qualifying, quantifying. Oh, we can't do that. That's too expensive. That'll never work. And a game you can play to get that going. You can play it with yourself. You can brainstorm with other people. Is yes and, which
Mm,
is
yep.
is about brainstorming, right? And how awful when you're in a brainstorming and you think, oh, I've got this idea, and the first thing out of someone else's mouth is no, or so the idea of yes and is just like, even if an idea is pretty wonky and like
Yeah.
probably not the best idea, you can usually find something about it that is good.
Right.
So let me see with the truck idea, like if someone who said, "Oh, well, we can drive over there and push the truck with our cars," or what, I don't know, form a convoy. It's like, okay, what I like about that idea is that, you're thinking of other modes of transportation. And what I think about with that is X, and you can add on to it. So you're not going, no, that's the stupidest idea I ever heard. And that's how
Right,
you get the
right.
flow of idea generation. And sometimes you can come up with things that you never thought,
Right, just being
just
open
being
to
open.
possibilities.
So that's
Yeah.
the innovate power. And then navigate is about connecting with your compass, your North Star, your purpose. A lot of times we'll talk about, like, what would your wiser elder self wish you had done in this situation? So what's
Okay.
really important? Like, do you want to freak out over a button being missing on the whatever, or the welt being a little off, or, you know, looking back when you're 70, 80, whatever years old, like, how would you have wished you had responded to this truck breaking down?
Right, right, right.
Um,
Because that's an actual legitimate thought.
mhm.
I'm the leader of this firm. I am completely devastated at this moment internally. I had lots of I needed to collect the balance due. Whatever the
Right.
things are, like this mattered. I'm leaving on vacation tomorrow. I do not
Yes.
want this on my head. But it's like, how are you handling it publicly to
Mhm.
your employees, to the trucking company, to your clients?
Mhm.
So navigating when all is said and done, what will I wish I said and did in this moment,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
If I were in my higher self moment,
Yep.
right?
Exactly. And then the last
Okay.
one is activate, which usually by the time you've applied one or two of the other powers, that's gotten you to that sort of clear-headed state. And activate is just taking sort of clear-headed action, clear-headed and focused
Mm.
action. Once you've quieted the saboteurs, worked through, okay, what's really going on here? Let's have some empathy for everybody. Okay, now what's the action? So it's the response versus that reacting, that the saboteurs want
Mm.
to react right away and, ah, you know.
That's a good way to put it. The saboteurs are just in emotion mode. They're
Yes.
moving, they're reacting, they're just indulging themselves in their emotions. But the sages are thinking, empathizing, ideating, and, not worrying, but tapping into the best version of themselves and then taking action based on all of that.
Yes.
I like that also. I don't know if that's part of it, but like talking about them in the third person, right?
Mhm.
Like they're not us. They
Yes.
are these negative biases that are in us, but they're thoughts, and we can become our thoughts. Of course
Mhm.
we can.
Mhm.
I know that our brains and our bodies have the ability to manifest whatever thoughts we put in it, but still the thoughts we're in charge of them and we can choose which ones. And that's, I guess, what the whole point of all of this is, right, Janine? Is,
Yes.
a mechanism for accepting that as a human person, things and thoughts are going to naturally occur, but grabbing hold of them ASAP and processing and tossing them,
Yes.
the ones that don't serve us, right?
And I'm so glad you brought up the third person idea with the saboteurs, because um they are not who we are. They are, and even when you talk about them, you may have noticed that didn't say I am a stickler, I am a controller. I said I have the stickler, I have the controller. Who I am and who we all are the sage, this magnificent, calm, creative, love-based being. And in fact, my company name, the Yum in Yes to Yum, not only stands for, like, wanting to help people have more yumminess in their lives, but it's an acronym for Your Undeniable Magnificence. And
Mm,
unfortunately, I think when we're born, like your grandchildren, the little ones, they know how great they are, right? They're not
right.
yet, like, just the gunk of life and living hasn't built up on them so much that we start to identify with those saboteurs and think that's who we are or how we are. And
Mm,
that's not the case at all. So thank you so
right.
much for bringing that up. That's a really important point.
Nice. And so that's at the heart of the work that you do with entrepreneurs, and you specialize in interior designers because this is your sweet spot and you
Hmm.
understand the challenges of having a design firm. So, but that's at the heart of what you do, right, Janine? Which is, it's one thing to talk about these things. It's one thing for us to say, hey, that really crappy thing just happened. Recognize that the pleaser in you is taken over and run through these first steps. But for many of us, this is a lot of head work to work through this and to move through these stages quickly. It's no different than if, like, I always use the analogy of running a marathon.
Hmm.
It's I'm not going to decide today that I'm going to do the New York City Marathon next week.
Hmm.
I'm going to take half a year to train for it and to really go through everything I need to go through, from figuring out what sneakers feel right, what clothing feels right, to running in the rain, running in the heat, running how many miles a day. Like, it's work to do this.
Yes,
It's not just, hey, flip, right?
exactly. Um, and I call it the inside job, because because that's exactly, that's what it is. And I love working with people to both, do the external stuff that you and your guests talk a lot about the processes and, building the business and the strategies, because that's absolutely critical. And then bringing this layer of, how do I move through this experience with sort of more ease and grace, by quieting these voices, learning how to take more command of my mind. Um, that's really, and ultimately, by doing this inside work, it ultimately impacts your business as well in a positive way, and beyond. I talked in the beginning about also your relationships. Like, imagine applying this to, your significant relationships in your life, and um, not, conflict. A lot of times in conflict, it's our saboteurs coming at each other, right? And if
Right.
we can diffuse that, even just one of us, we can start spreading that more, that calmer energy. Um, and I like to tell people, we're all responsible for our happiness, and we're also responsible for our stress. And it is a
Hmm.
choice, and you can choose ease. Not always easy, and it's not always automatic. Like, it is the process, like training for the marathon. Absolutely. These saboteurs, at least for me, have been ingrained for, decades. They've been
Mm.
entrenched getting in there. And so it's not a flip a switch, like, oh, I'm just going to change my mindset, and, life is roses and I'm in the sage sitting on top of a mountain all the time. And that's, I love, kind of being someone's co-pilot through that. Um,
Mm.
and just standing, being by their side and challenging them and guiding them and seeing the transformation is really rewarding as well.
That's nice. I love that. I love that they, the patterns, the thoughts can be so long ingrained in us that it's like the goal is to get to the acknowledgement that that is an outside thought, that it's not us, that,
Yes.
and that does take a minute. It's all the things. I mean, you know, I have half a dozen coaches that I work with. You know
Right,
what
right,
I'm
right.
saying?
Yes,
It's
I
like
do.
each one is like, sweetie, that is not a truth. I'm like, wow, okay.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but I love the idea of getting to ease.
Mhm.
It's a great ideal to shoot for, and I think that each of us has right now inherent capacity to do this. It's just a matter of how much how much assistance and guidance do we
Mhm.
need in order to do it.
Right.
But every one of us is capable of turning these saboteurs into sages quicker. They're going to be there. I understand from you. They're always going to be
Mhm.
there. But it's, to me, the goal is turning it quicker and not dwelling in it and
Right.
losing even a minute or a day or an hour or a week or a night's sleep over these things, right?
Yes.
Things that we can switch around.
And, we need to have the willingness to do the work, because it's not always
Right.
fun. So willingness is a
Right.
big element. It's not always, growth isn't always comfortable and fun, but the results are very much worth it.
Yes, yes, I love it. Well, Janine, this was so interesting and so enlightening. I appreciate it so much. I love this whole concept of, we're going to go over and take this saboteur assessment and just, again, I'm not going over there thinking this is who I am. I'm going over there going, oh, let me look for the markers are the first
Mhm.
things that I'm bound to typically say to myself, because if you put that on a wall in front of me, now the second I start to feel it, I can go, no, 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 sweetie, take a step out, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
it's very interesting. I love it. Thank you
Good.
so much, Janine, for sharing this information with us. And I appreciate that, Janine shared with me that she's been listening to the podcast since 2016. So
Yes.
amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, it's such a thrill and an honor to be able to meet you and to share this with your listeners, and just so happy we got to chat.
Me too. Thank you. Okay, this saboteur voice. Easier said than done sometimes to squash it, right? Think about how often negative thoughts creep into our minds. Even if you're a mostly positive person, it happens. Sometimes more than we realize. That's the thing, to be catching ourselves, right? Because this saboteur voice impacts everything: our performance, our relationships, and our overall well being. According to the positive intelligence framework that Janine works with, the first muscle is that interception of the saboteur, or what Janine calls judge. Then you use that sage voice to turn it around and see the opportunity in it. But before you can take these steps, you need to build those muscles. You need to do the exercises. We need to focus intensely on one singular sensation, she says. It may take some practice, but with good news, you can do this anywhere, and these practices are all tested and proven. Focusing on something forces us to disengage and adopt a more positive mindset so that we can access that sage voice. We can make this a daily practice, just like brushing our teeth. And even with the different magnitude of stress and events that happen in our lives, these tools and exercises will work no matter what. Janine has a track record in using this with her clients. So start with by taking the free saboteur assessment that Janine offers. We'll put that link in the show notes. This is a great start to reveal what your saboteur tendencies are. The power, the freedom, is always in the truth. It's looking in the mirror first and really acknowledging what's there, because when you have the truth, you can handle anything and you can change your outcome. All right. Now, notice I did not say you could change other people. Okay. Because the key here, as in everything, is addressing and creating change from within ourselves. And armed with information about the many sage and saboteur accomplices, we can make that maneuver through these voices, sifting for the useful ones and discarding the ones, and discarding and putting aside the why am I wasting my energy on these voices, right? That's my thing. I don't want any of us to waste our energy in rabbit holes with voices that are not legit. It's just a voice. Get rid of it, right? So thank you, Janine. I love conversations like this that talk about and give us great exercises to improve our mental well-being. Like a recent guest and one of the panelists at Luann Live said, Katie McDonald, she said, self-care is key to a thriving, well-designed business, and taking control of your saboteur voice is certainly a very large part of that. So thank you tons for listening today. I appreciate you so much. I hope you got some nice things to think about here. If you'd like to have a conversation about this episode, please come over to my Facebook group, Luann Nigara and Friends. Happy to have, share insights and learning lessons there. Okay. All righty. Decide to be excellent. Thank you for joining me today. This podcast is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. If you want to know more about me, my books, or Luann University, go to luannnigara.com. And if you are interested in having WindowWorks help you with your next window treatment or awning project in the New York, New Jersey metro area, go to windowworksnj.com to learn more. Have an excellent day.